Hello poker enthusiasts, today we're looking at 5 hands played by Louis from London. Louis is a competent and successful tournament player who is now transitioning to cash games. He played all these hands in a private club game at 20 NL, so let's see what we can improve in his game.
In this first hand, Hero opens pocket fours in the hijack, and I have my first tiny problem with this. It's fine to open pocket fours in the hijack, but not always. He makes it 3x here, and that means that he should actually tone down the frequency of raising to the point where I think in the hijack pocket fours actually become a fold. Now, I'm talking about tough games here, and I realize this is not a tough game, so I think this is actually fine, but in general, if you're up against good opponents, this would not necessarily be an open and definitely not to 3x. Here we get 3-bet by a splashy player in the small blind, big blind folds, and now we have a decision. So here, as we can see, pocket fours would just about be a call against the small blind raise. However, here we are dealing with a very splashy player, and he made it 3.3x rather than the suggested 5.5x, so I can be on board with this call here. Flop comes ace jack 8 with 2 clubs. We have pocket fours and we do have the club. Now our villain goes about third pot here. This is another very tight one. If we didn't have the 4 of clubs, I would definitely say this is a fold. Here, I mean, we have position, we are up against a very splashy player. I think in GTO terms this would still be a fold here, because we're basically only playing to have a set, especially the ace is a good card for him. Now on the turn, with this offsuit 6, villain checks, and Hero goes for a pretty big bet. Again, like against this type of player, maybe this is a good bet. Against a normal GTO player, this is a pretty bad bet, because what are we expecting to get called by here that's worse? Or what do we expect to fold out? And I just don't think this would do anything. Yes, you could argue maybe for protection against king queen, queen 10, something like that, but there are not many cards in the deck that help villains, so in that case I would just check here, because he could still have something like king jack or so that he will never fold. So I'm not in love with this bet, but in this particular case we get a fold. But that's exactly what I meant. He might have had some really random hand. In that case, yes, we got a little bit of protection, but against all the other hands that beat us and that would call here, I don't think risking so much money is worth it. So I would have just liked to see a check behind here and then evaluate river. In this next one we have a hijack raise, and Hero has ace-10 suited in the cutoff and 3 bets, perfectly happy with this one, and we get called by the hijack. And now queen 10-8 with 3 clubs. We obviously don't have a club, it gets checked to us, and this is a board where we could either go absolutely tiny or just check behind. I think checking behind is probably the better option here, but if you go with something ridiculous like 10% pot or even smaller than that, hijack might make a mistake against that. But yeah, Hero goes with a check, and I'm happy with that. Now the 4 of clubs on the turn is just such a terrible one, because now we just lose to any club here, and unfortunately villain now bets. I don't have any information about villain, but this is already a very close one. That said, we still have second pair, and he could just be messing around with God knows what. So I think calling once here is fine, but I would most likely not call a river bet unless it is absolutely tiny. Hero calls here, so fine with that. Now the 4 pairs on the river, and this time we get check to. I don't think we have to turn our hand into a bluff here, because I don't think we can really get rid of anything that's better than us, except maybe a queen if we go really big. But I think I would just take my chances here and check behind, and that's exactly what Hero did, and we win against the pair of 8s here. I don't really know why villain bet this one out on the turn. He probably didn't really know what to do with it. I don't think this is a strong player, so good to take note about that. But other than that, I think Hero played this one just fine. In this next one we have min raise from under the gun, and we call pocket 5s here on the button. Absolutely fine to do so. Just keep in mind that this is not a super profitable call. It's just about break even, but it's fine to do. Unfortunately we get squeezed by the small blind now, and the under the gun raise or fold. So now we have a decision. Obviously we're never gonna raise here. Should we call, should we fold? As you can see in GTO territory, this is a mix. However, it is better to fold here in my opinion against a normal sized raise, but that's exactly the issue here. GTO assumes that the raise is about 6.5 times the initial raise. However, Villain makes it quite small here, not even 5 times the initial raise. So I think I'm okay with calling here, but really only just about. I think I would probably still even have folded this, but I'm okay with a call here that Hero made. Jack 6, deuce, rainbow. We now face a continuation bet. This one is quite tricky, but I think against the small bet, and I think most players at this level on such a board, they will just c-bet their entire range, and against the range that just c-bets without even thinking here, we can't fold just yet. So I'm happy to call here, and Hero did that. On the 10 turn, Villain now checks, and I think we have a very easy check behind. No need to turn this into a bluff, and I don't think we can get called by anything worse. Hero checks behind, and on the Queen River, small blind checks again, thus indicating that he probably doesn't have a strong hand. He's either given up with absolute air, or he has some mediocre hand. Hero goes for a pot-sized bet here. When I first saw this, I actually didn't like it at all. Now, on reflection, I think it's not that bad. So, we have not shown a lot of strength so far, and now suddenly we're saying we have something big. Now, how many queens do we have here? I mean, it's possible that we have ace queen, king queen. Would we really pot it on this river? It's possible, maybe. But then what else would we have? Queen jack possibly or so. I don't think we have queen 10 because we would probably just fold that on the flop. Yeah, jack 10. Why didn't we bet the turn with jack 10? So basically we're saying we have a very nutted hand, something like a good queen or 2 pair here, and I think we will get looked up by a lot because that just doesn't sound very plausible. If Villain has a complete give up, yes, then we'll just win this one, but we wouldn't have won it anyway. So basically what we're trying to achieve here is getting a good hand to fold, a good hand being a 10 or a jack. You know, something like pocket 9s, pocket 8s, pocket 7s maybe. Those would be hands that we're targeting here with this big bet. Quite honestly, his range is actually a bit stronger than that, because like I don't think he has ace king or aces or kings the way he played, but there's still a tiny bit in his range more than in our range. So he can have a weak queen, even like queen 10. No, sorry, queen 10 is not a weak queen. King queen would probably be his weakest queen. I just don't think there are a lot of hands here that we can get to fold that would beat us. And that is exactly what's happening. Villain calls us with ace 10 here. By the way, Villain has no business whatsoever to squeeze here with ace 10 offsuit against an under the gun raise. If it were suited, yes, but not the offsuit variant. He should just have folded there. And I think this is now a situation where it becomes a bit clear that Hero is in fact a good tournament player rather than a cash game player, because in cash terms this is a flop that you would basically always check here out of position. And yeah, I get it, we have a splashy player on the button, but I mean, what are you trying to achieve here? I'm not quite sure. We're over betting this flop here with 2 over cards. Yeah, I guess we can probably fold out a lot of stuff like King 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, whatever, but is it really worth it against 2 players over betting? That is absolutely not a GTO move. Yeah, the GTO move would be to just check here. If we can get called by weaker hands, maybe this is something to go for, but we're still out of position and I don't really like this. So now we get called by the button, the big blind folds. The 4 of diamonds helps us a little bit because now we've picked up a gut shot plus our 2 overs, and now we go with another overbet here, which is really saying we have a big overpair. Against this type of player, I'm not sure if we can get him to fold a pocket pair, because by now he basically only has pocket pairs in his range. He called an overbet on the flop, so I'm not sure this is a good play, and we get called again on the 6 river. Now what does this change? Not much. I mean, he shouldn't have any 3s, we shouldn't have a 3, 7, 8, I don't think, maybe of hearts. We don't even have good blockers here with a jack of hearts, so I would just give up here now, definitely, and that's what Hero does. And now we face this overbet all in from our villain, and obviously this is a snap fold here, which Hero does. I don't know what the splasher player actually had in this hand, but I don't like the line here at all. I would have played this a lot more passively, and if the guy is so splashy, maybe even a check call is fine on the flop or on the turn, but definitely not over betting twice, because we're isolating ourselves against the top of his range, which is pocket pairs plus. So I would have liked to see this played much more passively, and unfortunately Hero just lost a lot of big blinds here by being very aggressive. In this last hand we have pocket 4s again, this time under the gun. We open to 3x. As I said earlier, I would prefer 2x, but because we have 2 splashy players behind us who are quite deep stacked, I'm okay with the 3x. They do indeed both call, and now the small blind goes all in here. He's super short stacked, only about 11 big blinds, and at this point I can understand why we would want to call. We are still super deep stacked against everyone else in the hand, and we are basically set mining here. We don't expect anyone behind us to re-raise us, so I think it's fine to call here. This is what Hero does, and indeed both players behind us call as well. 7-3 deuce here, and we are first to act. Definitely not going to bet here with this hand. Checking, and the cutoff checks behind, but the button now bets third pot. At this point I think a fold is in order, and the reason for that is fourfold. Number one, the pot is protected by the small blinds all in, so even if someone else is bluffing, we could already be beat here. Secondly, we have the cutoff behind us, and he might even raise here. Then yes, thirdly, the button might be bluffing here, but he could have us beat as well. He could have a merged range here with something like pocket 5s, 6s, 8s, 9s, 10s, or even if he has a flush draw, he still has a lot of outs here to improve, and that's the case also for the cutoff, so I don't love this. And the last reason is that we don't have the 4 of spades, so if we improve to a set here on the turn or on the river, it might be the 4 of spades, and that gets the flush there too, so we might lose an even bigger pot here if we hit a set, and I think at this point I would just fold here. Instead, Hero calls, and I can understand why, especially if he has some information here about the button being bluff heavy in such a spot, but I still think against another player in the hand and the protected main pot, I would just be out at this point. As played, the cutoff calls as well. We get an offsuit king on the turn, and he checks through. This is not bad news for us. And the river pairs the 3. That's also pretty good, because it's unlikely that anyone has a 3 at this point. But yeah, we don't want to do anything else than check here and hope to get a showdown without investing any more money. Cutoff now does bet though, and he bets half pot here. The button folds, and here we are deciding whether we should call or not. So I can't fault the hero now for calling here, which is what he ended up doing. I'm not sure we have the best hand, but then again, a lot of draws bricked, especially the spades, and now it's actually good that we don't have a spade in our hand. So I think at this point calling is not a mistake, but again you have to consider that the main pot is protected by the small blinds all in. It's quite close, we could go either way here, but that's why I would have just folded on the flop. As played, hero calls here now, and we win against the 5-6 offsuit, but you can see we lose against pocket queens in the main pot, so we only scoop the side pot here, where cutoff played it terribly, I think. Not that the bet on the river was that bad, but calling 5-6 offsuit against an under the gun raise and then calling again against the squeeze is pretty bad. But anyway, he does seem to be very splashy, and I can see why hero wanted to play against him. However, overall I still think that we should have folded on the flop.
Despite a few mistakes, Lewis will crush these games. I'm convinced about that. We can't say the same about the protagonists in the following video up here though.